getting detained for secondary screening. Step to the side.
Detained for what? I've already verified everything. My airline ID, FAA license, clearance. I'm a captain.
That rank makes you a higher risk profile.
I've cleared this checkpoint for 7 years. Verified. Call my airline.
You. Turn around. The child is coming with you.
Please.
4 gold stripes, a command presence, and a career spent defying gravity. For Captain Diana Landrum, her uniform was her armor, a symbol of every barrier she had broken. But at a CBP primary desk, that armor cracked when an officer looked at a black woman in uniform and saw a, quote, security threat instead of a senior captain. The story follows Diana Landrum, a high-achieving pilot who fought her way from flight school to the flight deck of major international routes. Wanting to preserve her 4-year-old daughter Charlotte's sense of wonder, Diana brought her along to witness the authority and respect her mother had earned. However, the inspiration turned into a nightmare at 1:23 p.m. when protocol became a pretext for prejudice. If you believe this CBP officer may have just crossed a line by detaining a veteran airline captain in full uniform in front of her child, drop your thoughts in the comments below. Ma'am, step away from the desk. I need to verify if this uniform is even authorized. The words cut through the ambient hum of the Dallas-Fort Worth International Arrivals Hall like a jagged blade. Captain Diana Landrum felt her daughter's tiny hand tighten around her index finger. 4-year-old Charlotte, holding an ice cream, looked up with wide, liquid eyes at the towering figure of Officer McCarthy. Diana stood in her full command navy blazer, the 4 gold stripes on her sleeves catching the harsh fluorescent light, her pilot's license and airline ID already resting on the counter. She had just spent 11 hours commanding a wide-body jet across the Atlantic, responsible for 300 lives and a $200 million aircraft. Yet here, on solid ground, she was being framed as a security threat. The air in the terminal suddenly felt thin, the space between the sterile plexiglass and the security line shrinking until it felt like a cage. Diana's journey to those 4 gold stripes had never been a smooth flight. Growing up in a neighborhood where the only planes people saw were those streaking high above toward the airport, she had been told that the cockpit was a room for men. She spent her 20s working 3 jobs to pay for flight hours, enduring the silent skepticism of instructors who looked at her and saw a hobbyist rather than a future captain. She had mastered the complex physics of lift and drag, the intricacies of meteorology, and the grueling discipline of flight school, eventually becoming one of the less than 1% of black female captains in the industry. Every promotion was a hard-won battle against the soft bigotry of low expectations. Her uniform wasn't just clothing. It was a testament to a lifetime of being twice as good to get half as far. For little Charlotte, her mother wasn't just a pilot, she was a superhero who could touch the clouds. This trip had been a reward, a chance for the girl to see Mommy's office in the sky. Throughout the flight, Charlotte had sat in the cabin with a miniature headset, telling the flight attendants that she was going to be a captain one day too. She had watched with awe as passengers thanked her mother during deplaning. To Charlotte, the world was a place of endless possibility because her mother held the controls. She didn't yet know that the world had a habit of trying to ground people who looked like them. Officer McCarthy, however, saw a different story. To him, the sight of a black woman in a senior officer's uniform didn't signal captain. It signaled a discrepancy. His worldview was built on a rigid database of patterns, and in his 15 years at the border, the pattern for a senior international pilot was almost exclusively white and male. He looked at Diana's credentials with a squint of practiced suspicion, convinced that the high-quality ID and the expensive tailoring of her blazer were part of an elaborate ruse. In his mind, he wasn't being biased, he was being thorough. He convinced himself that the presence of the child was a classic prop, used by smugglers or imposters to lower a guard. He felt a surge of self-righteous adrenaline, believing he was about to blow the lid off a major security breach. "I'm going to need backup at Station 4, McCarthy spoke into his radio, his eyes never leaving Diana's. The situation escalated with terrifying speed. Within minutes, 2 more officers arrived, creating a wall of blue between Diana and the exit. Travelers began to slow down, their faces a mix of curiosity and discomfort. The professional dignity Diana had maintained for 20 years was being stripped away in a public spectacle. McCarthy began to raise his voice, demanding to know where she really got the uniform. He treated her years of service as a fairy tale, and her presence in the terminal as a trespass. The most painful blow came not from the officers, but from the small voice at Diana's hip. "Mommy, did you do something bad?" Charlotte whispered, her bottom lip trembling. The girl's eyes moved from her mother's stoic face to the glinting handcuffs hanging from McCarthy's belt. The superhero was being treated like a villain, and the core of Charlotte's world was beginning to shake. Diana felt a roar of maternal fury, but she forced herself to remain eerily calm. She knew that any sign of agitation would be used to justify further aggression. She looked directly into McCarthy's eyes and said, "I am Captain Diana Landrum. You are currently interfering with a federal flight deck officer and unlawfully detaining a minor. I want your supervisor, and I want him now." In the windowless secondary screening room, the air grew even colder. McCarthy attempted to lead the interrogation with the same aggressive tone he used for suspected traffickers, but Diana was no longer just a passenger. She was a master of procedure. She sat with her back straight, Charlotte huddled in her lap, and began to recite the very federal codes McCarthy was violating. She refused to answer questions about her intentions, instead, demanding a log of the detention and the immediate presence of the port director. She knew the law better than the man trying to use it against her. She wasn't just a pilot anymore, she was a woman building a case. Meanwhile, in the front office, the digital world was already reacting. A passenger who had been standing in the customs line had filmed the entire initial encounter and posted it to social media with the caption, "CBP detaining a senior captain in front of her kid. This is profiling." By the time the port director, a seasoned official named Miller, looked at his phone, the video had over 100,000 views. He rushed to the screening room, his heart sinking as he saw Captain Landrum, a woman he had actually met at an aviation gala 2 years prior. He saw McCarthy standing over her, and he knew instantly that his department was about to be the face of a national scandal. The legal fallout was swift and devastating for the agency. The discovery phase of the $3.8 million lawsuit revealed a pattern in McCarthy's career, a disproportionate number of secondary inspections conducted on minority travelers with zero evidence of wrongdoing. Diana's legal team didn't just aim for a settlement, they aimed for a transformation. They presented the court with the image of a 4-year-old child being traumatized by the state because of the color of her mother's skin. The jury's verdict wasn't just about the money. It was a loud, clear condemnation of pattern recognition when it is used as a mask for prejudice. McCarthy was terminated, and the agency was forced to implement third-party oversight for all credential-based detentions. 5 years later, the terminal looked much the same, but the atmosphere had shifted. Diana walked through the arrivals hall, no longer feeling the need to brace herself. Beside her walked a 9-year-old Charlotte, who held her head high. As they approached the customs desk, the officer on duty looked at Diana's gold stripes, then at her ID, and then gave a respectful nod. "Welcome home, Captain," he said. Diana smiled, but she didn't just feel vindicated. She felt empowered. She had used the $3.8 million to start the Landrum Legacy Foundation, a group that provided legal and professional support for minority aviators facing discrimination. She had shown her daughter that, while the world might try to ground you, the law, and your own unwavering sense of self, could give you the wings to fly even higher.